talk about burnout, or at least see topics of burnout online, social media, podcasts, articles, you name it. There's so much information and data out there. Sometimes I'm yet to connect it to something, to me, to sit back and go, sounds like my situation. But the podcast is slightly different from our normal. I didn't expect the conversation to unfold how it did, in complete honesty, but I'm thankful that it has, because it's given us the opportunity and the platform to hopefully connect more to some of our listeners. Here's a little bit from today's episode.
You need to notice your patterns, like what leads you there. Make a note. I think it's a really important thing, if you're there, to make at least a mental note for yourself. Like, okay, why am I in this state? Like, I was in this state Tuesday. What happened on Tuesday? What happened today? And you will find out the pattern, what triggers them. Stop for a moment, take a very, very deep breath, and ask, like, where am I heading? Not just today, but in general in life. And obviously work is a really, really, really important part of our lives. But I think it's also important to realize it's not just one thing that purely defines us, and ask yourself the question, can I actually be great at my job with this mindset that I currently have without changing anything? And how does it affect others and myself?
Sitting down with our guest, we focus a little bit more not on what burnout is, not necessarily on how to stop it, but more around the journey to recovery. And we look at various topics, starting broad, we get specific on things that we can do as individuals. And no, I'm not talking about going out and having a walk. Yes, it helps. But I'm talking about other specific things that both myself and our guests have done in our own respective stages of burnout. And yes, it's one of those conversations that's a little bit raw, because very few people have heard me talk about this. But one of the, I really do hope it connects and resonates with whoever listens. There's a task that we asked you to do at the end of the podcast. I really do recommend sticking around, listening, actioning the task. And if you do want to have a deeper conversation, both myself and our guests, LinkedIn, they're in the footnotes. So thank you so much for choosing to listen to Tea Time. As always, it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to hearing the feedback. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a truly international recruiter with roots from Hungary and professional experience spanning the UK and Germany. She builds not only a global perspective, but a deeply human one for the world of recruitment. From scaling teams at fast-growth startups to guiding candidates through their most pivotal career moments, her work is all about unlocking potential across borders and backgrounds. But what happens when we do it at such a pace, with such pressure, that we forget to focus on ourselves? We lose sight of maybe what our own career paths are, and we kind of slip into autopilot. And this is the focus of today's topic. It's a raw conversation about the true importance of recovery within our profession and how maybe not doing so can lead very quickly to burnout. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, the talent acquisition partner, Dora Pasztor. So thank you so much for joining, Dora.
Thank you, Eden, for having me. It's a true honor to be here on this podcast and have this discussion with you.
I appreciate it a lot. And look, this is one of those topics where I think I'm going to say it's like a taboo topic slightly, right? Mental health is obviously, there's a lot more awareness around it. We're definitely encouraging more conversations around it. But still, I find in some professions, you can't show weakness in some regards, or can't show it because it's seen as a weakness. I apologize for that phrase in there. But you get what I mean. It's kind of one of those topics where some people will absolutely talk about it and some people will just bury it. So, I'm very, very keen to kind of dive into this because I feel like the topic of burnout is one that I've personally experienced. But, before we kind of get into that topic, what I really want to do is peel back a layer. Everyone gets the same question, Dora. And I know you've listened to the podcast a few times. So hopefully you've got a well-structured answer ready. Let's see. I might have to change the question soon because I feel like everyone starts to get it. So from your perspective, what makes a high-performing recruitment team?
Yes, I think it's all across the board what makes high-performing team. It's not necessarily specific to talent acquisition. I think a high level of collaboration and people who are in touch with their own capabilities. They're good listeners. They are happy to give and receive feedback and act on it. And I think basically, if you have the right mentality, most of the things can be learned. Now, I'm not saying that I will be like a rocket scientist anytime soon, but I think in talent acquisition teams, when probably soft skills are equally as important as hard skills, that's also highly relevant.
By the way, I 100% have full faith. If you want to be a rocket engineer or rocket scientist, go do it. I've got full faith in you. I see you strapped to the rocket on the side of Tesla's SpaceX's next launch. No, but in all seriousness, I think you're right. By the way, I think in our profession, the vast majority of what we do is trainable. It's those core soft skills and being in touch with more about yourself that maybe does help create a high performing team. And obviously, the topic of it is around burnout is an element, but we want to talk about recovery of burnout, right? Because I feel like a lot of conversations, and I was doing some research around this after, when we first spoke about the topic, but a lot of the information that's out there is how to prevent it, how to prevent burnout. And, but what happens when we're there? What's the recovery phase looking like a little bit? What does that feel like? And I guess what is the importance of the recovery phase for you in general? And, when you talk about recovery for yourself or for this topic, what do you actually mean? Just so I guess we can set the scene if someone's in this situation or feel like they get into that situation.
Yeah, I really feel like when we talk about burnout or like recovery, but the state of burnout is not just like a yes or no. I think it really is a scale. So you can't really define like, okay, I'm now burnt out and probably the next day you are not. First of all, it's something I think that you need to be actively working against. And this sounds bad, but it's not necessarily as difficult as it sounds. And it's not as drastic as it sounds if you actually can detect your own cues. And in terms to what to do when you're there, I think it really depends on what level it is. So burnout can have a lot of phases. It has psychological signs, it has behavioral signs, it has physical signs, actually, in severe cases. And it does not just affect, obviously, your job, but your whole life. So I think if you detect the signs relatively early, then there is a pretty good toolkit that you can use. When it comes to burnout, and I'm really sorry, like if it's a bit into the middle, but we need to understand that it actually has like a very bad psychological sign, which is like cynicism. It's basically a slow detachment, and it's an emotional detachment. And it does not start like very drastic. It just starts with a bit of loss of motivation. I'm probably a bit less interested in what am I doing than I was yesterday. And cynicism actually can come from two sources. What's bad about it? It can come from anxiety when we're actually overwhelmed and our abilities are not up to the level of the tasks that we should sort out, or we have way too many tasks, but they can actually come from boredom as well. So I think it's really important that we find our own challenges. We are in touch with our capabilities on the first place. So it can be a daily reflection, but obviously that might be a bit too much. But sometimes what I do, every month I look back like, okay, what have I done differently this month? And I'm trying to build on that and set my own challenges. But let's say you are in a state of mind when you're approaching cynicism and you're just a bit less motivated than you were, because I've been there myself as well. It was actually not necessarily out of anxiety that we talk about a lot, but it was boredom. And to open up about this, I was in an environment when I was actually not listened to. I was given tasks that are a bit mundane, and there is nothing wrong with that if your capabilities are there, but there are no two people. So you can't compare A to B. Everyone has their strengths. what I have done, because I'm not entirely sure how much in time have I caught it. But you need to actually stop and notice your patterns. Like what triggers this emotional detachment? Is it something that you are getting way more tasks that you can do? Is it something that your input is not listened to? Like you're creating all this data-driven analytics and trying to report back, and then it's just like disregarded. Like obviously, like we're talking about how much data and reporting is, but in reality, not all companies, unfortunately, are utilizing everything that you give them, and that can be like a suffocating feeling. So anyway, you need to notice your patterns, like what leads you there. Make a note. Like I don't necessarily journal. I know that there are a lot of people who are practicing like mindfulness and they are journaling, but I think it's a really important thing if you're there to make at least a mental note for yourself. Like, okay, why am I in this state? Like I was in this state Tuesday. What happened on Tuesday? What happened today? And you will find out the pattern, what triggers them. And when you find this pattern, what triggers them, it's really important to do not talk down on yourself. When we are in a negative mental state, we are really, really prone to internalize things. And you can say like, okay, I am lazy or I am not motivated. But you should put a bit of distance and should not regard this as like your personal flaw, and should look at what's around you, what triggers this. And you should say like, okay, I have issues with X, Y, Z, and that's why I'm in this state. I think this should be probably the first toolkit to know what personally brings this to you.
So really having that, I guess, is that conscious discussion with yourself. Where am I? Why am I here? I mean, if I look back on some of the examples that I've had, it's when work and personal has clashed quite a lot. So I got married in May of this year, and a lot was happening around work, and it clashed dramatically with personal. And I felt like there were some situations where I felt guilty for taking time off, getting married and not working. And not from my company, by the way. Like my guys were super supportive of it. They're telling me to take the time off. Some of the clients that I was working with, who I no longer work with because of this situation, where it was very much like, well, no, we're paying you. You need to be here. I was like, well, this is I hope, once in a life week. That's all I'm asking for separation from it. So there's those elements, and that's anxiety. I fell into that. I've never fallen into it from the gap of boredom. I've always been quite fortunate from that side, where I've always been pushed and stretched, but maybe pushed sometimes too hard to go further than I felt comfortable, and that's the anxiety part. Obviously, I love that toolkit, by the way, about having that mental check-in and kind of being aware of what are your triggers. We'll kind of explore a little bit more of how we can kind of go down that journey. But I guess I'm seeing a lot of businesses are now creating well-being budgets, right? A lot of businesses are advocating for this, and I see some businesses do really well with it. I see some businesses try and maybe falter a little bit. But why is it actually important that we are, as talent acquisition professionals, taking responsibility and being mindful of our own mental health around burnout and the triggers around it for ourselves? Like, what is the actual, I guess, the negative impact we're aware of, right? How it is, but I guess peel it back a little bit, and why is it going to help improve us and the companies we work with?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really relevant question, and obviously all across the board. But in our industry, we need to be in a way always on. We are dealing with people. We are actually helping people finding the next step in their career. Whether you're an internal or agency recruiter, you are helping and assisting people make these big life decisions. And I just feel like you can't really fill other people's cup as long as yours is not full. So if you are personally someone who is in talent acquisition, and for that matter, anyone who's in people in culture, do not make sure and take the responsibility apart from obviously taking the toolkit if you're lucky and your company offers you. But you need to take it as your own responsibility as well, because it can lead to quite a lot of things. Like obviously that emotional distancing what we mentioned is just accelerated, because it's not just like, okay, I have a bad day, I'm just not going to talk to my colleagues. You are surrounded by people. You are actually, I think, to be a good talent acquisition partner or recruiter, you are doing kind of a service by offering what you do best, and you have to have the best intentions. Now, if you're emotionally attached from this is taking apart a big human aspect of it. And you are just left with, okay, smashing my KPIs, hopefully smashing the KPIs, but just doing enough not to get fired or not to get that notice or something. And that's why we have this responsibility, because it does not just affect actually our own job for a day or 2 weeks. It does affect other people's choices. And obviously, to just talk about like how much a bad hire costs in time, money, or engagement for a company, I think that's very much talked about. But if people who are on the front line actually representing a company are not taking care of their own mental health, it's just detrimental for a company. Both people who are actually in the company and teams who you are recruiting for, because if you make a bad hire, or not a bad hire, but probably they are not a culture of it, you just were too burnt out to actually properly assess that, then they are going to either quit, and that just puts pressure on the current team. And then we are just in a limbo that just starts affect quite a lot of people, and quite soon, I would say.
That phrase you said at the beginning, I really hope, I'm going to repeat it because I really hope someone's listened to it, but it's always on. That I don't think I've ever heard more Bruce spoke about the talent acquisition function. We are always on. Doesn't matter if you're internal or external, embedded RPO. How many of us really switch off after work? How many of us have taken calls when everyone else has gone home, when your child's asleep or your dinner's getting cold, for that person that you have to get hold of because you have to be available to them because it's the only time they can speak for another 3 or 4 days and you need to get the answer to your stakeholder, whatever the case is. That, I think, is the super tricky part, because we're not robots, right? We all have our own lives. And yeah, we can kind of create these boundaries where we say, okay, I'm not going to look at my laptop at this time, but it doesn't always happen, not in this function at least anyways. And that's where it kind of starts to creep in. But I think also what you're sharing there is, it's not just one small thing doesn't just impact, okay, I'm not talking to the colleagues, but it's you not talking to colleagues can yield to the slowed down decision, or it might lead into you passing someone that shouldn't have passed someone that has a knock on later on down the line. But it's really difficult, I think, when you're in that position to peel back and go, okay, I'm just going to be great from now on. I mean, I'm just going to go for it, and everyone's going to be good. Because again, you're not fixing the problem, you're just slapping a plaster over it, or a plaster over an axe wound, as I would say, right? So you really kind of need to really go on a bit more of a, I don't want to sound spiritual here, I kind of feel like a bit more of a healing journey to make sure that you are truly identifying and eliminating as much as possible. So if it's cool for you, then I kind of want to talk about things that maybe you and I have both done together or separately, and from if they match, because like I said, we've both gone through this journey to some degree at some point. So starting kind of on the broader perspective, some of the elements that might suggest that we can start that process of recovery, and then kind of more in the granular, that what you've particularly done or what I've particularly done to hopefully be around the other end. Again, I think I'm out the other end. I'm pretty sure I'm out the other end. Ask me in 6 months' time and let's have a conversation again. No, all jokes aside. That's probably, by the way, that is a deflection of me. By the way, that's probably me deflecting the real cause by making a joke out of it. There we go. If someone does know me a bit more, then they're probably laughing along with it. If not, bad joke didn't land. So from starting broad, or from your perspective, what can we do to start that journey?
Yes. Yeah, again, it really depends on when you are in this scale. If you're very deep down, then just get out of the bed and go out on the fresh air. That's a good first step. If you're not there, and hopefully, most people are not there yet, I think it's really important to reconnect with your values. Obviously, you do the self-reflection, which is a really good like lay of the land, like, okay, where am I? Where was I mentally in my goals, whatever. But we really often just forget to look at the bigger picture. Like, what am I really doing, or what I should be doing does still actually in touch with my values? So that's a really important question to ask, because if the answer is no, then there is obviously, like a need of a change for environment, I'm not encouraging this as the first action. But if you're already established and this no longer serves us and it's no longer aligning with our values, then probably it's the best for everyone, for us, and everyone around us.
And that I actually don't think it's a bad first step to begin with, because we talk about values, we talk about company values, we talk about your own values, but I would argue that most listeners say, yeah, I've got values, but if you was to literally say, what are they right now? If you ask me right this second, I couldn't list off 3 or 4 values, but I'd have to really think about it, because I don't connect with my values as I don't sit down and think about it as much as maybe even I should as well. But I think that's a really good first step. What values do I actually hold? There are definitely a few people that live and they've probably got them tattooed on themselves on a wall somewhere. They read them in a mirror every day, and totally fine. But I don't think the vast majority of us do even connect to just generic root cause values. So I think that's a brilliant first step, just to weigh in.
Yeah, no, it's pretty important. And as you said, like probably if you just asked me off guard, like to list my values, I would need to think very, very, very deeply. Even though I came prepared to this podcast and I try to do it quite often. But first of all, I think you have like set values, and obviously you have values that are going to be changing throughout your life, affected by life events and so on. But it's just really important to ask ourselves the question, like, where is this leading? Am I still in this industry? Why I joined, or is this serving the purpose, or has the value or the goal aligned? Probably on the way, but where am I on this road? And it's something to think about very deeply. Probably the answer is not going to come to you. Probably it's going to take days, weeks. Something is going to happen that actually not gives you the sign, but it's going to shed a light on it. I also feel like it's very, very important to open up to connections as a second step, because when we are emotionally detached, we are detaching ourselves from the community. So like a pretty typical thing in burnout, what you can see in behavioral science, is that people are no longer attending company events, team events. They are just not speaking up really. They are not engaged. They are obviously just doing the bare minimum, but how you can, I think, detect it is pretty much the level of engagement. And when you are in this state, it's a very slippery slope, because the most disconnected you are from your environment, actually, you are more slipping into burnout. So it really helps to talk to, it doesn't need to be a colleague necessarily. It can be a friend. It can be your family. And if you feel like you really need like an external point of view, or like someone who is neutral and could help you, I really feel like it's important to give ourselves a confession and tell us like, okay, I need a therapist. And I feel like it's an investment into yourself, which is, it should not be stigmatized. I know that there are environments or there are people who go and they are ashamed. And I think it's the best thing. I think, to be fair, even people who think that they don't have any problem, if you could afford in time and money, it's the best thing to go to a therapist, because you can get a point of someone who's actually not an actor in your life. So they could actually see the events from an outside point of view.
Yeah.
And obviously, they are also highly qualified to give you the tools that you need to actually go into a better stage. And what is probably a very good thing to do, to force yourself, and you're in this state, to do small acts of kindness. Now, when you're emotionally detached, it's just, it feels so difficult to say, honestly, thank you for people, or to say, good job, I really appreciate your help, because it does not come authentically. Now, I'm obviously not a psychologist, so I would just like to say it in a very simple way. You just have to fake it till you make it, because actually this kindness can connect you back to who you are.
I think the hitting back a layer, by the way, there on the therapist. I'm not going to say his name because I don't know if he'd want me to say his name. But a CTO that I know in Berlin, he basically said all his friends at the CTOs, C-suites, every single one of them has a therapist. Every single one. He said it doesn't. The people who don't think they need one probably need them the most. BetterHelp, the application. We're not sponsored by BetterHelp in any way, shape, or form. But it is a good application to connect people virtually for therapists. If you don't want to see someone in person, you can call them and video them. Again, not sponsored, affiliated in any way, shape, or form. Just use it, and it's good. So I do agree with that as well. I think there's so much conversation that can be had out of it. I would also argue as well, keeping in touch with the talent acquisition community. And obviously our listeners are all TA, well, the vast majority are in the TA profession. But considering where we are right now, and a lot of people listening are job seekers and how difficult the market is right now, my inbox is always open. All right, as Dora, your LinkedIn will be into this description as well. There are communities that we can connect you with. There are conversations, even if it's just a listen, an ear to listen to. I wholeheartedly agree. Don't disconnect from people that can support you, but it's also asking. And I think slipping into my own self for a second, I never asked. And that's always been a trait of mine throughout my entire life. I don't always. I have to wait till kind of like a breaking point where someone proactively asks me, "Do you need the help?" And then I'm like, "Yes, please." Like everything, unload everything. But I will just keep going until that. And I still do it, to be frank with you. I mean, I'm still crap at learning it, even though I recognize it. They're kind of like what I would say is like the broader sense, but using myself there, like I say, I recognize those triggers that I probably should ask. I don't. Is there anything specific, Laura, that's kind of helped you where, more on a specific granular level to you, just as simple tasks that maybe could help prevent or start the process of preventing burnout or start the process of recovery quicker that kind of you felt, worked for you, could work for someone else? Make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And I'm trying to remember. I mean, I cannot actually recall like what was the exact like toolkit, because I think it really depends on the situation. But for me, it really helps to break down, for example, like bigger tasks to smaller tasks. Now comes something like with to-do list. I really like it, and it really helps me. The reason is why I really like doing like bigger tasks. Because like if you are just at somewhere where you feel like, okay, it's exceeding my capacities, you are just prone to block. At least I know from my own experience, like, oh God, it's going to take so much time and I don't know where to start. Whereas if you break it down and if you cross it off your list, it gives you the dopamine. Actually, it gets you going, and it wants you to repeat that process. But you really need to break it down in my case. But to be fair, when like an exact toolkit to come out from a burnout like stage, I really feel like communication and finding your community really helped me. Now I know it's not a small and specific task to actually complete, but you need to be able to share your experience, and I think it's really good to relate to other people who are working in the same industry or probably come across the same challenges, to just learn from their stories. How did they come over? And I'm sorry to not give you here any really specific, but I think it's really depends on where you are.
No, I agree. It does entirely depend on the person and who they are as an individual. I'm thinking logically for myself. There was certain situations. So I used to be an avid reader. Read every single day, and then just stopped, and then didn't pick up for months and months and months. And that was like a little trigger sign to me to go, like I was just always tired. I just felt drained. I just felt like just lost the energy, lost the motivation, as it were, to read. And I loved it. I was absolutely like just addicted to the books. And I think kind of what helped me was I started to carve out more time on that side. So I purposefully made sure that, okay, like having a child definitely doesn't make it easier to try to carve out time, try to balance a business, a child, and a relationship, and friends, and the social side. But I made it purposeful, like 30 minutes a day. That was it. It was my sacred time. No one else touched it. It was just mine, and that kind of got me back into that side of things. That was like the small task that I could start taking. That, like I said, it helped me understand a little bit more about where I was and maybe why I kind of slipped into not reading in the first place. I was trying to like think back of what stopped me in the first place. Well, there was pressure here or anxiety creeped in there, and then kind of, okay, how can I do to prevent that? So the reading wasn't the result. What was the result? It wasn't the fix, but it helped understand what the fix to the root problem was.
Yeah, 100%. And when you started reading again, how did that make you feel? Like, did you feel like instant like fulfillment, or did it take time actually to not feel guilty?
Bit of both. So it wasn't like this euphoric, oh my God, this is like life's back to normal. There was this guilt thinking I'm wasting time here. I'm wasting time. Like I need to do this, this, and this, or like the guilt creeped in. Um, Also slightly just sitting and thinking, what am I doing? Like, why am I, what, again, boredom maybe creeped in a little bit. But then that was just persisted with it. And also, I think it does help. The book was quite good. It was quite enjoyable. So that was obviously I wanted to read on. But yeah, no, it wasn't like this immediate, this is life is fixed. It was more just a slow, gradual burn and getting back into those small steps to get back routine. That's probably the bigger thing that was lacked out of it is like when I started to slip into a bit more of a burnout state, it was like routine kind of just went out the window. What I was doing, just I stopped doing, and then I kind of got back to what I was doing again, and that's kind of what helped me get back to a position where I was like, okay, cool, back on track.
Yeah, I think, by listening to this, and I felt like similar when I came back to my own hobbies, or like, for example, like kind of a schedule. It's not very set every day, but just like getting my social life back and everything after burnt out is something that you need to accept that it's probably not, it is not going to instantly make you feel better, but it's a process. And it's probably not really talked about that you can do lots of small tasks, very useful. You can choose and pick your own strategy, try out things, but you need to learn to appreciate the process, and you need to accept that it's probably not going to yield like an instant result. And that's why intentionally working and keeping up with this, sometimes even when we don't enjoy these things that are actually filling our cup, is super important. And be mindful and really remember these things after a very overwhelming day, that I'm doing these things actually for myself, even though if I'm tired.
You just use the phrase overwhelming then. Again, coming back to talent acquisition, our days can become absolute chaos. Like you start on a Monday morning thinking, great, week ahead, and then before Monday afternoon's finished, the entire week back-to-back calls. You've got meetings left, right, and centre. You're juggling stakeholders, and that's, like I said, that's where anxiety for a lot of us will creep in, and burnout starts the process, right? So how can we can't stop it. We have our jobs to do, but how can we give ourselves a little bit more flexibility? What's worked for yourself when we talk about work and kind of getting control of this again? What would you recommend to maybe people who are kind of maybe feeling that right now?
Yeah, you have to set some boundaries. I know I also came from the agency side. It's really, really tempting to do everything at once. But the thing is, you need to put time aside when it's like blocking, it's focus time. You can react in 1 hour. I know that time kills deals, but I don't think it's going to get killed in 1 hour.
Someone has done external recruitment.
Yes.
The good old analogy that every trainer says.
Oh, yes. 10 before 10 and, time kills deals. I mean, yes, of course, you need to be reactive, you need to be timely, but like you need to appreciate that you need to do your tasks. And if you are always reacting to things, which I'm also prone to, because I still know it's time sensitive, obviously, it's not I need to do my job. That's a big priority. But on me, how am I prioritizing is really affecting other people's work. But you still need to set out blocks when you are actually dealing with the tasks that you set out to deal with, because otherwise it's just going to pile up. And at Monday, 6 p.m. or 5 p.m., depending on when you're finishing, you will probably further away for finishing from when you were actually starting the day if you don't deal with this. Now, yeah, it probably sounds a bit hypercritical and but I need to deal with these things. But yeah, I'm talking about experience. When you are reacting all the time and you are not dealing with your tasks, then it just can overwhelm you. So also try to do regular breaks. Now, even if it's just like 5 minutes, going out for a coffee, going down and up the stairs, like a bit of change of scenery actually can put things into perspective as well. And to just talk like 8 hours a day to people, because more or less we're talking to 8 hours a day to people, can be exhausting. So I actually had time, and I went home, and I was telling to people in my life, like, I'm really sorry, I'm not able to talk at this point. And so you need to be respectful of that you getting into that state when you are actually not paying attention to yourself can affect everyone around you, clients, candidates, your internal stakeholders if you're working in-house, but also your family and friends. I think it's also, in a really ideal world, you have a mentor or manager or a peer or someone that you can open up to about this problem. Like, I'm not necessarily saying like to go into like a very deep thing, but to just have an understanding so that they can actually also like probably sometimes can tell you like, okay, take a break. I actually had colleagues when I was working in agency recruitment, they had to remind me, okay, Dora, please go have a walk, okay, around the block. We will see you in 10 minutes. So, and that also actually I can help with not getting isolated.
Yeah. The taking control of your diary, I think, is a big one. I do find that your diary very quickly is, you quickly lose control. It's taken up by everyone else, especially if you have like Calendly links. All of a sudden, your private time, especially if you haven't set it up properly, becomes everyone's time. I think that's a really powerful one, creating, those purposefully you moments throughout your day. I really like having that manager or peer or mentor that you can lean on. Again, you don't need to just share your entire life story around it, but it's about being open enough to say, look, I might need some help here. I might need some capacity, like someone can you help me take some workload off me, whatever the case is, to kind of free up that time. But I feel like it's one of these conversations, like I said, I said it at the beginning, so I kind of knew this was going to go down slightly of a different angle from what our usual podcasts go down, right? Our usual podcast is how do we perform better? How do we get better in talent acquisition? But we already discussed it, and I was really up for it because I felt like this would be the first time that I've spoken about this to pretty much anyone other than 2 people, maybe 3 people tops, that have known the extent of it. So it is a raw conversation in that. But I do know that there's a lot of people like me who quite simply just bury things, push it down. Don't deal with it. You bury it and you keep going. You just keep head down, keep going. By the way, I'm here to say that is not what you should do as much as, and I'm not advocating for glorifying, hustle culture or anything like that. But it's not what we should be doing. But it is far easier said than done. In a position now where I am, in the sense I can look back and go, okay, I know better. But, mid-20s Eden didn't know better. And there's definitely people listening that are probably like that right now. So we've come to the end of it. I'm hoping there's some topics that have sparked conversations with people by themselves. That's what I hope from this, where they've just sparked and said, I feel like that, or I'm leaning towards that, or actually I can help others in this position. So what would you recommend, or based on being through the situation yourself, the first thing that someone who is feeling they're going down this journey could do? Just one thing, because that's what I'd like them to sit back and go, okay, podcast is finished. Number 1, I'm going to do this. And number 2, I'm going to go connect with Dora because she's a wicked person to learn from.
Stop for a moment, take a very, very deep breath, and ask, like, where am I heading? Not just today, but in general in life. And obviously work is a really, really, really important part of our lives. But I think it's also important to realize it's not just one thing that purely defines us, and ask yourself the question, can I actually be great at my job with this mindset that I currently have without changing anything? And how does it affect others and myself? And it's a very complex question, but I think it's a really good starting point. And obviously we can have bad days. So if someone is having a bad day, it does not necessarily mean that they are on the road to burnout. It's a roller coaster to be in talent acquisition or recruitment. But I think if your answer is constantly cloudy and you can't see the clear vision, then that's when you really have to sit down and investigate things further.
Love that. I do. Truly, Dora. It's, like I said, didn't expect the conversation to flow where it did, and for me to open up to you as much as I have. But I think that's also the beauty of this topic, and feeling safe enough to talk to someone about it, regardless if people are now going to listen to this. I mean, after we finish recording, maybe I'll have a different opinion. I'm joking. I wouldn't. Dora, it's been a true pleasure. I do appreciate you being, again, as honest and raw as well, and bringing your own experiences. Like I said, firm believer that we need to connect and communicate in the function. So if someone wants to pop up, say hello, learn a bit more about yourself, where is the best place that you are?
I would say please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk, to network, to, if you are based in Munich, to meet in person, have that coffee, tea, whatever rocks your boat. So LinkedIn probably the best.
Perfect. Thank you so much, truly, and looking forward to hearing a response from this. Enjoy the rest of your day.
My pleasure, Eden. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.